Some of you have heard a phrase your entire life, and you never questioned it, not because it made sense, but because it sounded spiritual. Turn the other cheek. You heard it in church. You heard it from authority. You heard it when you were hurting, and it was always delivered the same way. Stay quiet. Don't push back. Don't defend yourself. Just take it. And over time that teaching didn't produce peace. It produced confusion. It produced frustration. And for some of you it justified things in your life that should have never been justified.
If turn the other cheek means what people say it means, then Jesus told people to accept abuse. If that's true, then the implications are serious. But if that's not what he meant, then something has been misunderstood, misapplied, and in some cases misused. We are not going to assume. We are not going to rely on tradition. We are going to examine it carefully. This is not a minor issue. This is not a side topic. This affects real people in real situations. It affects how people respond to conflict, pressure, mistreatment, and harm. It affects whether someone speaks up or stays silent, whether they set boundaries or lose themselves trying to be good. When Scripture is misunderstood at this level, and when it gets applied incorrectly, then people get hurt. The phrase comes from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus says, "If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other also." That's it. That is the statement that has been expanded into something much larger. But before we expand it, we have to understand it. Because if you misunderstand the example, you will misapply the principle. Jesus doesn't say, if someone beats you, if someone attacks your life, if someone repeatedly harms you. He says, if someone slaps you on the right cheek. That detail matters more than people realize. Because in that cultural context, to strike someone on the right cheek, you had to use a backhand. A backhand was not primarily about injury. It was about insult. It was about humiliation. It was about establishing dominance. It was a way of saying, you are beneath me. So what Jesus is addressing here is not ongoing physical abuse. He is addressing a moment of personal insult. A moment where someone tries to reduce your dignity. And if you don't see that clearly, then you will apply this teaching to situations it was never meant to govern. Jesus says, turn the other cheek. Now most people interpret that as, take it again. But that interpretation does not hold up under scrutiny. When you turn your head, you are not simply accepting the action. You are changing the situation. The person who struck you can no longer repeat the same act in the same way. They must either stop or treat you as an equal. And in that moment, without raising your hand, you communicate something clearly. You do not define my worth. That is not passivity. That is controlled resistance. If this teaching meant accept abuse, then Jesus would model that consistently. But he does not. When he is struck, he responds, if I spoke wrongly, prove it. If I spoke truth, why did you strike me? That is not silence. That is not submission. That is confrontation without retaliation. He does not escalate. But he also does not pretend that the act was acceptable. That balance is critical. The same pattern appears with Paul. He is about to be flogged, and he asks, is it legal for you to do this? Everything stops. He asserts his rights. He interrupts the harm. He forces accountability. So now we have consistency. Jesus confronts. Paul resists. Neither of them treats abuse as obedience. Scripture does not endorse abuse. It condemns oppression, exploitation, and unjust authority. It establishes justice, accountability, and protection for the vulnerable. Even eye for an eye was not about revenge. It was about limits. It prevented escalation. So the full biblical framework is this: no revenge, no unchecked injustice. Both are necessary. The mistake is subtle, but serious. People take non-retaliation and turn it into passive submission. Those are not the same thing. Non-retaliation means You do not escalate harm. Passive submission means you do not resist harm at all. Jesus taught the first. People often enforce the second. Jesus is breaking a cycle of escalation. You hurt me, I hurt you worse. You insult me, I destroy you. That cycle never ends. Jesus introduces a different response, not retaliation, not submission, control. A response that says, I will not become what I am confronting. Now we bring this into reality. Turning the other cheek does not mean stay in abusive situations. Accept repeated harm. Refuse to set boundaries. Avoid protecting yourself. It does not mean just keep taking it. It does mean do not seek revenge. Do not act from hatred. Do not escalate unnecessarily. You are still responsible to speak, leave, and protect yourself. Set boundaries. Seek help when needed. That is not disobedience. That is alignment with truth. If you want this reduced to one line, Jesus forbids revenge, not self-protection. That is accurate. That is defensible and supported by Scripture. Some people misuse this teaching because it's easier. It avoids conflict. It sounds spiritual, but it produces damage. It keeps people silent who should speak. It keeps people trapped who should leave. That is not righteousness. Turning the other cheek is not weakness. It is not surrender. It is also not permission for abuse. It is the refusal to let evil control your response, while also refusing to let it define your worth. When you understand that clearly, you don't walk away weaker. You walk away grounded. You walk away aware. You walk away with clarity.
If you like this content, then kindly hit like, subscribe, and share.